Hey, folks, welcome into the BN Cubs Podcast. I am Brett Taylor. That's Michael Cerami. We are brought to you by Ankin Law, 3126 million, injury law made personal. Thanks, Howard. He's my boy. And we're here. Yes, we're tight. We're going to talk Cubs here, and we're entering into that phase of the offseason where the good stuff is going to start to percolate. We've had a couple options decisions, obviously, that always kicks off the offseason, but not a lot of transaction activity yet, which is not surprising because qualifying offers went out last week and decisions are due November 18th. Then there's the rostering deadline for the Rule 5, and there's the non-tender deadline. So that's when you start to see the activity really picking up. But I think as far as the Cubs are concerned, I wouldn't have expected to see a ton of activity yet, specifically because they have to know what's going to happen with Shota Imanaga, really, before, I think, for multiple reasons. One, because of the rotation, and also because of budgeting purposes. That's $22 million that shouldn't, fundamentally alter the course of their offseason, but would fairly change how they might allocate some of those dollars. And so I think that that's probably, understandable that the Cubs wouldn't have jumped on anything really significant yet, because I think they're going to need to know what happens there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's $22 million. And this is coming from someone who is I like to believe I'm someone now who is always pushing the Cubs to spend more and that they should. And,
A meatball,
I take offense to that as an Italian American.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
Oh, man. Honestly, the way I sort of look at it, and this is all going to sort of snowball into the conversation that we wanted to have today, but it's like, whether, even if Shota Imanaga had a great second half, and the Cubs picked up the option, let's say, or in any version of it where he's back and is costing $20-ish million, they still were likely to need to go get a free agent starting pitcher, like a high quality top of the rotation type.
Yes.
I'd say that the difference is if Shota Imanaga does not return to the Cubs, either by the way of the qualifying offer or some other deal, then they might just need to get two pitchers.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it is at, when it comes to like thinking about the impact of whether or not he's and his money are returning. Because I guess what I'm saying is, even with him in the fold, the Cubs payroll is well below where it was last year and where it will be, by the end of the offseason. And not just in a default sense. Like, I think they're going to have a lot of money to spend this year. It's just that 22 more million and one vacancy in the rotation fundamentally changes your approach. So I don't begrudge them that,
patience. Yeah.
That patience.
And especially when there isn't a ton that they could or plan to do on the positional side, that'll cost a lot of money. I think there are things that we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about as possibilities, but probably less likely than what they'll spend on the pitching side. And certainly Jed Hoyer and Carter Hawkins underscored that this week. I think for that reason, it is important to say, regardless of what Imanaga decides, there should be payroll space there for the Cubs to make a significant pitching addition.
Let's start there though. I want to
we're going to get there. Where we have to start is I wanted to note the sort of chatter, rumor reporting stuff that Imanaga and every other qualifying offer recipient are likely to reject this year. Maybe so. What I wanted to point out is if you are Imanaga and his representatives, you've got this, week available to you to find out what is my market going to look like if I don't accept the qualifying offer. Couple ways you can do that. Obviously, you can try to reach out to teams and ask that question. Hey, you going to be interested in my guy? And what are you going to pay? And how worried are you about draft pick compensation? All these things. Okay, That's one way. And I'm sure that has happened. Another way would be to float that you are planning to reject, planning to be a full and open free agent. And then you might get a better sense of how aggressive teams are actually going to be on you once you become available, because you're essentially telling them, hey, I am available. And maybe you hear a lot, maybe you don't. And maybe therefore you decide at the end of that 7 days, you say, actually, psych, I'm going to take the qualifying offer because I didn't really love what I was hearing. So point there being, I saw the reports. I'm not saying they're not true, that that's the chatter, I'm just saying I wouldn't take that at face, that it definitely means he's going to reject the qualifying offer.
Well, think about this even another way, and more strategic, more Scott Boras-y. If you are approaching the rest of the market in one of two ways, which way do you think would be better for you? The first way is, yeah, we're thinking about rejecting the qualifying offer. We're pretty sure we can get something better out there. Or, of course, we're rejecting the qualifying offer. Shota Imanaga, he's worth way more than that. Yeah. Why would he's not even considering it?
Right.
1 year and $22 million. Of course we could beat that. And it's like, I know that sounds silly, and maybe in an era where most of these decisions are spit out by algorithms, to whatever value that exists, I still think that the narrative is important. And I think that you'd be a fool to disagree, because Scott Boras is the most successful agent, and his entire thing is narrative. I mean, that is his whole approach. It's how he tricks the owners of the Nationals into paying lots of millions of dollars over the years or whatever. But so yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking. It was like, if I was Shota Imanaga's agents, I'd be like, what do you mean? The 1 year deal? No way.
Right.
So, but you know what, you've spurred in me, and this is something I hadn't thought until you just were going through that in your mind. Even if we're like, okay, we don't think Shota Imanaga is the right fit. I'm not saying we think that, but I'm saying if that's the Cubs mentality at their extension level or whatever, don't you think that he should have a market there for teams that are less likely to contend, but are able to roll the dice on him having a really great first half or a great year, and then if you have a multi-year deal where you can use him as a trade chip, basically do what the Cubs did, have done multiple times in the past, where you get a guy specifically to trade him and recoup some of that value, because he does have the upside of a very successful top of the rotation pitcher. It's just, for a contender, you might not be willing to bet on that. For a non-contender, you might be like, hey, let's see if he could bounce back, and then we could flip him at this deadline, next offseason, whatever. Shouldn't there be a market there for that?
Well, historically, you don't see teams signing multi-year deals for guys with that thinking.
Do that,
mostly because the guarantee, then you're on the hook for $50 million or whatever if it doesn't work. That said, I think it's worth keeping in mind that the qualifying offer, it does ding your market. For guys in this tier, there's no question about it. But half the league only gives up a post third rounder for signing. No IFA money. It's really not that significant of a cost. Where it really hurts you, obviously, is the luxury tax paying teams. It's 2 picks and IFA money. And I don't know. That's a lot for me if I was signing Imanaga to a market deal. And then for the larger market, non-luxury tax teams, it's a post second, it's your second highest pick and a little bit of IFA money. You could see that, especially because I do genuinely believe Shota Imanaga brings a little extra value by virtue of his, he's a star in Japan, but he's also a Japanese star in the United States. And I think that brings some extra value. And, let's not forget too, he is a pitchability guy, like he always was. And so it's those types. It's not hard for me to imagine at 32 or whatever, being like, okay, here's what worked, here's what didn't this year, here's what happened, here's what I can change, especially when you have 6 or 7 pitches. There's just a lot more there that you can work with to stay effective and or rebound at this age. That is not necessarily true of all pitchers. So we'll see.
You would fit in the Cubs front office so well. I'm heralding back to a call. Brett and I called him this morning as I was going to get a coffee, and we started talking about Dylan Cease and some other pitchers, and we were getting it. And then I had to stop us and go, wait. We're recording the podcast like in 20 minutes. Let's stop. We're doing it right now. So, but it was a similar conversation about the types of pitchers you prefer.
Well, and we'll get into that. It's not, I wouldn't call it necessarily the types of pitchers I prefer so much as a risk analysis. Like, I mean, again,
you'd fit in the Cubs front office.
I know.
So
some of it's just my nature. I'm a risk averse person, but some of it is, I'm sure that, you cover a particular type of front office for, 12 years, it like sort of, gets on you. But yeah, let's transition. Cause the Imanaga stuff and the Cubs' pursuit of pitching and the relationship between those two things kind of sets up a lot of what we wanted to get into. And, I'll say at the top, there's a great piece at The Athletic today. Sadaf Sharma and Patrick Mooney writing about sort of, among other things, Cubs pitching pursuits, with a fair bit of what I would describe as optimism about the caliber of pitcher the Cubs may be pursuing, which a point I have made all offseason and I'll keep making until it's different. Cubs have not signed a 9-figure pitcher in 8 years. Yu Darvish was the last one, and that was a long time ago. And so I think it's fair that our default expectation is that they'd be looking at more like a Matthew Boyd or Jameson Taillon type deal than some of these bigger names. But this Athletic piece that's sort of a primer for this discussion, it is looking at a lot of those bigger type names. And so we wanted to talk about that a bit.
Yeah. And I mean, and I actually don't think we need to sit on this too long, but I do just want to say that, at the start of the offseason, Bob Nightingale had a report calling the Cubs potentially the biggest sleeper team in free agency, as implying that they will spend, even though people don't expect it. Bruce Levine had said that the Cubs wouldn't be afraid to give Imai, I don't know, is it Tatsuya? I don't know how to say his first name exactly correctly. I'm sure we will learn. A big contract. They wouldn't be afraid to do that. And then Patrick Mooney said something similar about the Cubs' pursuits in free agency and targeting a higher tier of free agent starting pitcher than they have in the recent past. So that was like 3 sort of like national, local reports, all sort of suggesting something similar. Then by contrast, David Kaplan, who, I know in a lot of ways he's extremely popular. In a lot of ways, he's extremely polarizing. That's in part by design. I think he's very good at what he does. I'm certain, for anyone out there who, I see this on Twitter all the time, he has very good sources and he is very good at sourcing reports and stories, and he is right a lot. That doesn't mean his opinions are always right, but his reporting, which is a separate part of his thing, tends to be pretty good. And so when he goes out there and says, like, I've heard that they're not going to be shopping in the deep end of the pool for big long-term deals, it does make you wonder what's going on. But the overwhelming suggestion from most reporters so far is that the Cubs are going to spend some money. And I don't think there's any better reporting on the Cubs out there than Patrick Mooney and Sadaf Sharma's work at The Athletic. I think they're about as trustworthy as it gets. And there's plenty of great people, but they are, to me at least, I don't know, I'm sure you agree, they are pretty much the gold standard when it comes to like local Cubs reporting. I think they are never putting anything out there that doesn't have some very solid foundation in reality. So this article they're talking about, I mean, they mention a ton of names from the top end of the pool, like Cease and Imai, to sort of the middle upside of Michael King, which is a guy that I think could make a lot of sense for the Cubs. And then even in trade, they bring up Edward Cabrera, a guy on the Marlins who the Cubs targeted at the deadline. The Cubs talked to the Marlins about Jesus Luzardo last year. So there's definitely been like an ongoing conversation, which is, again, for those that don't follow this along, we see this all the time where teams, start these trade conversations a year in advance, sometimes about different players, but it's about finding out with the other front office, what sort of preferences they have in a return, what sort of, timing, money, all of these things that line up. And then eventually, boom, a trade goes down. So what was your general reaction to that article? I mean, did it change anything about what you thought? Because it changed one thing for me, but I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, it really did. So it's not like I hadn't been aware of what you were setting up, that other reporters had indicated, the Cubs are going to spend. And it's not that I didn't believe that. It's more, I needed more context for that, needed more color for like, well, what are you hearing that sounds like spending to you? Like there's a difference between the Cubs adding 30 or 40 million this offseason in commitments for 2026, which they assuredly will, because even in the years when we're like, they're not spending, if you actually look at what they committed, it's always in that range because they're adding a Carson Kelly, they're adding a Matthew Boyd, like those things add up. But that's fundamentally different than committing 150 million for Dylan Cease or a Tatsuya Imai. Like those are different kinds of moves that, like, to me is a different looking offseason than we have seen from the Cubs in a very long time. And so I was very dubious that was actually where this was headed. And I'm not saying like one article is going to totally turn me 180 on that, but as you said, these two reporters are very connected, and they are also, I think they tend to be conservative in terms of their willingness to put stuff out there.
In this category, like
especially
in terms
in this
of rumors stuff.
Yes, exactly. And look, I podcasted with those guys for a long time. And so I also have a sense of how they put their stuff together and sort of.
Forgot about that for a second. It's like they're your exes. Actually, I hate them. What's that movie with Michael Cera, the Edgar Wright movie where he has to battle all of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's got like a long name.
Anyway, that's
Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah. I'm gonna have my Scott Pilgrim moment, but I have to go fight Mooney and Sahadev for.
No, come on, baby. This is the only podcast for me. No, but because of that background, it also just, I'm not, spilling any secrets here. I know how cautious they are about making proclamations. And so when I read a piece like that and I'm like, they are writing that it's actually legitimately possible that the Cubs are going to be serious pursuers on these big names. That's different. That's different than other off seasons that we've seen in recent memory. And and at least it makes me feel like I need to be, it's less like hopium when I'm writing about Imai and more like, okay, let's really evaluate this fit.
You know what? Can I color that one step further? There's other people who are very clearly connected. Let's say John Heyman, whose game is rumors a little bit more, whose bread and butter is making sure that stuff gets out there. And so the threshold by which they're sharing things is like a little lower. Whereas that's not what Mooney and Sahadev do. I mean, that's not what that's not how they see their job. I would tell you.
And it's a time of year thing a little bit. Like you're going to have a little bit lower threshold this time of year, but that's a great point. Like there's a little, I don't know, behind the scenes thing is when you see good national writers or reporters or local who typically don't dabble that much in the rumor game, when they drop something, like if Jordan Bastian drops a rumor.
Oh my God. What a perfect example. It would be like, this is happening.
This is happening. This is very real. Another one, just random, since we're on this, is to pay attention to is Keith Law. He doesn't actually do a lot of rumors and transaction stuff. But he'll just like randomly, occasionally bust something out. Like, I'm hearing that it's a guarantee. It's a lock. It's done.
But not to peel it back even further. But if you go back to the deadline, since I feel like we have some space from this now, I did it, I think 3 times in a row where I went, oh, this is a good player to keep an eye on. And it was Andrew Kittredge. And then this is a good player. And I was like, you guys, I may have heard something. I don't do this very often. But I just, I'll leave that to the big boys most of the time to break unless I really have a solid.
Well, it's like, it's a way
sources.
we can have our cake and eat it too. We can,
exactly.
We can get and it's for the users, right? Like it's ultimately it isn't just a pat on our own back when we're tipping that stuff off. We have information that for one reason or another, we can't share in a reporting way, but like, we'd like to get names and info in front of readers and listeners because they find that stuff interesting. And so,
you follow us, ideally you might feel as though you can be ahead of the game on what you know or don't know. That's why I did it. But
what you're saying is they should rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast and tell all their friends that they should be listening to this podcast.
I guess I can say, I'm gonna say one thing now, because this doesn't feel very reportery, because there's a lot of people suggesting this. For example, Bruce Levine started the offseason mentioning that Dylan Cease is going to be a free agent target of the Cubs this offseason, and others have sort of implied such. I've heard that the Cubs have been talking about Cease, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I am very certain that they do a lot of due diligence on all types of free agents, especially in the category of free agent that they're going to be targeting, which is starting pitching, and that is straight from Jed Hoyer and Carter Hawkins' mouth. So there's like nothing big there, but I can't say it's not. I haven't heard the opposite. I haven't heard, no, they're not going to possibly talk, but they have discussed Dylan Cease. So I kind of want to get into Cease a little bit. I think that's worth talking about. And is there a version of a deal above 150 million that you're comfortable with? Or is it like, are you just like, I cannot possibly, believe that would happen? And I don't mean, of course they should spend anything, whatever. Sure. We can't say that about every free agent. So
sure. I mean, what's unspoken here is that relative to other Cubs fans, other evaluators and stuff, I'm probably on the lower end of folks on Dylan Cease for the Cubs, not because I don't think he's a good pitcher and not because I wouldn't celebrate loudly if they signed him. It is only in contrast to maybe some other moves that are available to the Cubs, or even, it's probably even gentler than that. I just have questions about how pitchers like Dylan Cease age. And this was a conversation Michael and I were having, that a point I often make at the site, and this is just born out of following the game closely for a very long time, is when it comes to starting pitchers and the aging curve, what you see is 90% of pitchers have a moment, 29, 30, 31, 32 or so, where they will lose a couple clicks on their fastball and some of the sharpness on their breaking pitches. It's just a physiological reality for, again, 90% of pitchers. And when that happens, two things can happen. You can find your way into a little more pitchability, a little bit more execution, a little bit more command, a little bit more staying off the barrel. This kind of way of evolving and becoming, from age 31 to 36, a really effective starting pitcher, not the dominant, maybe one that you were in your younger days, but a very effective starter. Or it can be that, wow, you were only succeeding because you could miss bats, and you can't miss bats now, and you're getting clobbered. And where I get nervous on someone like Dylan Cease is when he gets hit hard. And I've seen that profile with some other guys, that when they go past this age and they lose a little bit of the stuff, they lose a little bit of the bat missing, and that sort of squeezes you on both ends. You get hit even harder, and there's more balls in play, so you're giving up even more damage. And it can be a really rough transition to try and figure out some other way of being. Now, I did mention there's about 10% of pitchers, the Justin Verlanders of the world, that they just don't ever really lose that that velocity and stuff. They can just carry it through. They're freaks. They can carry it through their 30s. And so
this is where I wanted to stop you in the car.
Oh, sorry. Final point. As an example, that is why I did love the Yu Darvish signing, because even though he's a power guy, he'd had the Tommy John surgery late in his 20s. He had evolved this 10 pitch mix that just gives him so much more room for error. And I loved the John Lester signing, because John Lester had already passed the dip, and he'd already lost 2 miles on his fastball. He had shown for 2 seasons after that he was an effective pitcher. It's like, okay, he's probably going to age well. So anyway, that sets up.
Okay. So a couple things. I have a lot of thoughts on that. And this is kind of where we stopped in the car. Cause I was like, wait. We can't do this without microphones, because content is king.
Live your life for content. Yeah.
Yeah. Did it even happen if it wasn't?
If no one recorded it.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking of all stupid things to say. Okay. A couple things. One, I take a little bit, I disagree a little bit when you say like, okay, there's like there's the Justin Verlanders of the world. It's like, no, he's the 1% that he did it till 40. I think we're probably like ignoring a wide swath of pitchers that are in that 9% where you're like, you don't have to say maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. Dylan Cease doesn't have to be Justin Verlander to succeed and to have a useful next contract. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, but you know what? But I will probably go stronger than you think I would. Verlander is an extreme example. Zach Wheeler is another strong example. But what I am saying is, it does seem like, I could be wrong about this because this is anecdotal, but it does seem like there isn't a lot of gray area where it's like either guys do sustain and stay very successful by still being a power pitcher deep into their 30s, or they have a period of struggle.
But I guess it
seem like
Dylan
guys
Cease
like
is 30, right? So I'm saying like you do 4 years of 4 years of Dylan Cease being good, and then he falls off the cliff at 35. It's like an other possible route.
Kind of what I'm saying. I feel like we don't see a lot of sustained power pitcher guys
at the age 32,
3, 4. Like I feel like they've, I don't think so.
We have to look into that.
I feel like there's usually a transition for the most successful ones. There's a transition that takes place at that sort of physical, because the decline, that's just a physiology thing, right? That's not unique to pitchers or whatever. That's 28, 29, 30, you will physically change.
But I guess sometimes it feels to me though, like you might have ignored that for Shota Imanaga, and if you've made this point before, so I don't mean ignore that. Let me color that in a little bit, because I don't think you'll disagree at the end of what I'm saying, is that, for Shota Imanaga or Kyle Hendricks, you've made this argument. It's like when you're surviving at that, like the bottom threshold of like, if you lose another half a mile an hour, it's like, it kind of doesn't matter how good you execute. You're throwing too soft or whatever. And those guys, but now I guess what I would say the difference is Shota Imanaga costs $50 million. Kyle Hendricks costs $80 million. Dylan Cease, what you're paying for is the assumption that because he misses bats and he's a power pitcher, the ceiling is higher. And so that's maybe where the difference is. It's like, of course everyone should want Dylan Cease on their team. It's at what cost do you want? He's obviously,
it's not like I'm arguing he's a bad pitcher.
Right. Exactly. So I would say this though. I would say here's one possible reason that I think it still could be worth paying him at a high level. You don't know what's going to happen. But I could see him having 1 or 2 seasons where he maintains his velocity and his bat missing ability. Then maybe there's a season in there where he loses it and doesn't figure it out yet. And you're like, crap, this stinks. But then there are 1 to 2 to 3 more seasons where he does that transition. It's like, yes, would it be great to have had that in the past?
If he figures out that transition.
Yes. No, right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, would it be nice to have it like Leicester, where it happened already, and therefore you have more confidence. Sure, but you're not getting the first two seasons. Then,
sure,
you know what I mean, and that's kind of
sure. And you can't predict. You can't predict exactly when that's going to happen, and
right,
and it might not.
So that's why, and so let me toss something even further into the mix that the Mooney and Sahadev article really made me think. I'm now kind of convinced that the Cubs are going to get 2 starting pitchers.
Do you count Imanaga as one of those?
No. Yes. If Imanaga stays, 1, if he goes, 2. And I think that here's a way that the Cubs might not spend a lot. And that's if they do execute a trade for a Joe Ryan and Edward Cabrera, then the second pitcher is going to be a lower tier pitcher. I don't think they're signing Dylan Cease and trading for Edward Cabrera.
Why not?
Now, because I think that they will. I think that they like a Michael King. I think, or it would have been like a Shane Bieber or Jack Flaherty. I think they want one guy that does it, and if they spend big, it's in prospect capital or money.
2 different pools of spending. They could. I know,
but don't you think? Do you think that they see it that way? Because I don't know that they do.
Well, I was thinking about this before we recorded, because I was writing a Chris Bubich piece, because I could see, and it's similar as like if they trade for Bubich, I don't think that at all precludes them staying at that top tier and spending on a starting pitcher. And then I started to think, wow, what a massive rotation upgrade that is with 2 moves.
Yeah, but Bubich is a different thing than Cabrera because he's got 1 year and was hurt and should cost a lot
in terms
less.
of the cost. Right. It'd be a much, much lower acquisition
different
cost.
thing.
But in terms of hoped for 2026 performance.
Oh, sure.
Same tier. And it just got me thinking generally about, because then when you were saying it, I'm like, wait, why couldn't they do both? Why couldn't they decide, you know what? We have an opportunity right now to massively improve our rotation at a time when we don't really need to spend to massively improve our positional group.
Yeah.
And,
but do you want to know the answer? You know this already. Let's say you trade Owen Casey. I'm just making up a name for Edward Cabrera or Joe Ryan. Okay. And then you go spend a ton of money on Dylan Cease, right? Well, you now have 1 less prospect control for 6 years. So you're losing. That is money you're going to have to spend in a couple years for a right fielder that maybe you wouldn't have had to. Yeah. So it circles back around.
They've got 2 outfielders that are free agents after this year. And
so it does eat into it. I just think that, and again, what I'm saying is in terms of, I think they'll make 1 very big splashy addition and then 1, this guy could be impactful. And either one can come from free agency or trade on both sides. And I think that's how they're going to go about it in the event that Shota Imanaga does not stay. And hey, that's fun. I feel like the Cubs haven't, you brought it up. Like we haven't had I know Shota kind of counts, Tyone kind of counts, but I don't know. We haven't had a pitching addition where you're like, oh, hell yeah, in a while since Darvish. Like it just doesn't.
Not to diminish guys who've come and been very successful. Yeah. But it's different than when they're pursuing John Lester and at the winter meetings, you're up at 2 a.m. because you're like, oh,
so exciting.
Is it, it's a different.
And getting a starting pitcher like that, it's not quite like getting a quarterback in football, but it does feel like, man, this is and that's, I actually am going to throw one more thing out there about Dylan Cease. Obviously every pitcher can get hurt and whatever. Dude throws a lot of innings and makes a lot of starts.
Yeah.
He is always out there. And there is under discussed value in the way that helps preserve, a bullpen, which can help you win other games that he's not pitching. So there's reason there. I also love the story. I love for him to come back.
I know it'd be fun for him to come back.
I mean, come on, it's exciting. So I'm excited to see what happens there. And I don't know. I think that there's a level that doesn't make sense, but this is, if they really go and attack pitching the way that it sounds like they're going to this offseason with the defense that they've had last year and are returning next year, suddenly you're like, man, we're like a pitching defense base stealing team. That's a fun brand of baseball It's like the 2015 Royals type of baseball, So I don't know. I could see that. I could see that making sense. It also sounds very Jed Hoyer-y and Carter Hawkins-y.
You could see them feeling like that's a more efficient way to get wins.
Yeah. Oh my God, I just rolled my eyes so hard. Like Carter Hawkins, I swear, I love him, and I don't love him. I love, his apparent intelligence for the game. His comments that like a win is a win is a win. If you add it on defense, it was like, I really hated that quote. I like it really to my core was like, we are so past being impressed by that line of thinking. It is so go ahead and operate that way behind the scenes. Nobody wants to hear a win is a win is a win. You could add it on. Oh my God. It's like, it's so gross. It makes me feel negative feelings. It doesn't matter that I believe it and agree with it because I do. Yeah. I think he's right. Stop saying it.
It feels very divorced from sports fandom.
Yeah. I don't think it's crazy. So again, it's consultancy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's very corporate.
It's like, it's very corporate. And it's like, again, internally, that is how I want you to operate.
Right.
But that's not, I'm sorry, but I'm over that in my life. All right. Do you want to, we should transition to the, sorry. Okay. Transition corner. This week's transition corner is brought to you by Feldco. Feldco, the home renewal experts. Bleacher Nation is proud to partner with Feldco. For almost 50 years, Feldco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their window siding, doors, and roofing. Feldco is family owned and prides themselves in delighting their customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, Feldco offers a perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. Would you like to tee up this week's transaction corner? Or
speaking of coming back to the Cubs, we thought again in the transaction corner, we're just talking about fun stuff. Kind of, it's sort of like maybe realistic, maybe not, but it's just sort of things that come across our transom and that we think might be fun to discuss. And this week with the GM meetings going on and Scott Boras holding court, one of his big clients this offseason is our old friend, Cody Bellinger. And of course he was asked about the Cubs. And I mean, I get it. That's an easy ask. But it makes for a fun conversation. Is there any universe in which the Cubs this offseason would contemplate bringing back Cody Bellinger?
I mean, so I do want to say a couple things in support of an idea that I don't think is going to happen, but just to put it out. The Cubs lost a right fielder to free agency. That's just true. I mean, they obviously can make it work, and you don't need to just be like, well, Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros, one. Two, the Cubs are about to lose two more outfielders after this year. So, Bellinger is going to get a long-term deal. If you really believed in him, it's not like it's impossible to see that fitting. You make it work for 1 year and then you're fine thereafter.
He's only 30.
So he's only 30. The Cubs have twice signed Cody Bellinger.
Mm-hmm.
That's just factually correct. There's something about his game that they appreciate. That's clearly true. That doesn't mean they appreciate it to the level of his, that his free agency is going to approach after playing a year in a ballpark made specifically for him. I mean, obviously, but he is a good base runner. He's very defensively versatile, can play first, can cover center if he absolutely needed to, can obviously cover right field and has done it at Wrigley, where his experience there may give him a leg up defensively, yada, 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 yada. And then the last thing is, for whatever this worth, and I think it's worth nothing because I have no idea. Well, actually, I have two more things. This one being worth nothing because I don't know why this was brought about. But Bob Nightingale wrote that the Cubs might be looking for a corner outfielder this offseason. I don't know if that was just because they lost Kyle Tucker and he was like, well, therefore they would be looking for one. I don't know. It didn't sound like that, but doesn't strike me as particularly likely. The last thing I'll say, and this is not me reporting the Cubs have interest in Cody Bellinger, but I have heard that, he is a name that they have talked about. But again, anyone who quotes me on that needs to include this follow-up that they, at this point of the year, they're looking at and talking about everyone. It's not the same thing as like, this is a guy they're pursuing. This is a guy they're targeting. Yeah. That I have no idea if that's true. And that's not what I'm saying. I just know that it has come up. And so like, whatever, I guess that's a lot of theoretically in his favor, points, but can you provide the other side? Can you be the devil to my angel?
Yeah. I mean, and I think the best point that you made in there is that this is a guy they've signed twice. So there is, it isn't invented out of whole cloth that they must like Cody Bellinger. Yeah. And it's also true that it is not hard to articulate how he would make the 2026 Cubs better. Like, it's just, okay, he just replaces Kyle Tucker. Seiya goes back to DH. And the young guys are still depth. Boom, you've potentially maybe not upgraded your lineup, but kept it flat. But the thing is, I think, in particularly in the context of the Cubs spending aggressively on pitching, I cannot envision a world where they're committing $150 million to Cody Bellinger, particularly when they do, I think, believe in Moises Ballesteros' bat. I think they do have some interest in seeing what Owen Casey can be at the big league level. We don't even mention Kevin Alcantara, but I feel like we should. And I just think that when you talk about the allocation of resources and you talk about Carter Hawkins' corporate speak for like a win is a win, and you try to figure out where can you most easily add them. Well, on this roster, it is not even complicated to say the easiest place to add wins is on the pitching side. And so if you have $150 million to spend to upgrade this team, and I mean, that's an imagined number, but are you choosing Dylan Cease or are you choosing Cody Bellinger? Again, not a hard conversation for me.
But it's really easy. You sign Dylan Cease, and there are options that are exciting and interesting to play. If you sign Cody Bellinger, there's not Dylan Cease options.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's not modest. There are some pitchers, but there's obviously Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros are two of the Cubs' top prospects. They're already at the big league level. They can try.
Right.
For pitching, there's not really, I don't know. It's not the same thing. So I agree with you on that. I will also point out, again, something that everyone knows, but that expected home runs by ballpark, 24 at Yankee Stadium, 15 at Wrigley for last year for Cody Bellinger. So it's like, that's a huge, gigantic. Huge and for what it's worth, the Yankees is the second highest and the Cubs are one of the lowest. Like, it's the same conversation we had with Isaac Paredes. Like there are ballparks that are better suited for certain players. And that's not the only reason Cody Bellinger had his best season since he was an MVP. And he obviously had a very good year with the Cubs in 2023 as well. I don't think you should just expect him to be the guy he was last year, even if there are some, adjustments being made, kind of the way you were talking about pitchers, where it's like you change your game a little bit because of the way, things have evolved with your body and over the course of your career. But again, he did just finish his age 29 season. So he is young. All those things, are true. He knows everything he needs to know about Wrigley. He was pretty beloved here. I think he was well liked among fans, especially after that first season.
Oh, for sure. And he's he's not attached to draft pick compensation anymore. So, that reduces the cost a little bit.
If they were like, we're going to sign Dylan Cease, trade for Edward Cabrera, and we're also signing Cody Bellinger, God bless. Let's go for it. It's just that I think what we're saying is he can't be the primary outlay of what are clearly limited cash expenditures.
I don't think that that's the best way to improve this roster. If it's limited, which it is. But beloved player. I also think that there's also just, he's going to be, I think, more attractive to a handful of other clubs this offseason than to the Cubs, where especially, his ability to play first base is pretty muted on the Cubs because Michael Busch just emerged as like a star. So
A star left-handed, also defensively sound.
Yeah.
Like if he was a righty slugger who wasn't great at fielding if the Cubs had Pete Alonso, you might be like, okay, maybe there's a version where like having Cody Bellinger like makes some sense. That's not the case. Michael Busch is awesome and cheap and defensively sound. Like it's just So I don't see it. And let's take it a step further really quick. The same is true in center field with PCA. He's a left-handed, defensively, stellar center fielder. So Bellinger's ability to play center in a pinch or as needed is also muted on the Cubs.
Yeah, I think that's
about the size. Brett froze. Oh, there you are. All right.
No, Michael froze.
I froze.
No,
it's like Schrodinger's freezing podcast.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, this is the BN Cubs podcast, and we are brought to you by Ankin Law, 312-6million, injury law made personal. That's Michael Cerami. I'm Brett Taylor. Read our stuff at Bleacher Nation. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Please and thanks. And we will be back at you soon. And big decisions coming. Like I said, the Imanaga decision could dictate a chunk of this offseason. So stay tuned. November 18th is when that's due. Goodbye.